Have you ever stopped to think about how you end your days? Night falls after a long day of work or school, and you decide to lie down, turn on your phone, and look for some entertainment. Minutes later, without realizing it, you're immersed in an endless list of videos, each one more explicit and addictive than the last. You lose track of time, fall into a trance-like state, and in the end, you're overwhelmed by feelings of guilt, regret, and disgust toward yourself. You turn off your phone, promising never to do it again, but the next day, the same thing happens. This cycle is no coincidence. You are not weak or flawed. You have simply developed an addiction, one of the most powerful and destructive forces that can take over your life. But here's the good news. You can break this cycle, and today we're going to explore how to do it. Plutarch once said, "Vice is the worst enemy of man." Why? Because a few vices are enough to overshadow many virtues. Think about this. When you give in to a vice, you don't just lose time. You lose something far more valuable, your freedom. Every time you give in to that impulse, you give up the ability to decide for yourself. You stop being the master of your actions and become a slave to your desires. But what exactly is a vice? The word vice comes from the Latin vitium, meaning defect. Over time, it came to refer to moral defects in human beings: lying, coveting, hating, seeking revenge. For the Stoics, vice was the irrational desire to prolong pleasure, the opposite of virtue. Marcus Aurelius said, "Vice is its own punishment. It only leads to the destruction of the self." Christians, on the other hand, see vice as an inclination toward sinfulness, toward anything that distances us from the divine. Paul expressed this clearly in his letter to the Romans. "I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do." This phrase perfectly summarizes the internal battle we all face every day. We know our vices destroy us, yet we keep giving in to them. Why does this happen? Vices arise from a poor exercise of reason. Our body doesn't distinguish between good and bad. It only seeks pleasurable, immediate sensations. When we lack self-control, we are dominated by these irrational desires, inevitably falling into vice. And here's the most painful part. Giving in to vice doesn't just distance us from our goals, it also disconnects us from our humanity. We become impulsive, prioritizing momentary pleasure over real purpose. In other words, we stop being free. If you are not the one voluntarily deciding to give in to vice, then you are under the control of a greater force. Your flesh, your impulses, your emotions. This is not only self-destructive, it's disrespectful to yourself. No one who truly loves themselves would allow themselves to do something harmful. On the contrary, if you love someone, you choose to preserve their well-being. The equation is simple. The more love you have for yourself, the fewer decisions you'll make that pollute your soul. The less love you have for yourself, the more decisions you'll make that destroy your being. The quality of your life depends strictly on the quality of the decisions you make in the present. It doesn't matter what you plan to do in the future. Virtue is a continuous choice, here and now. So, how do you leave vice behind? Here's a clear and practical plan. 1. Recognize the problem. Carl Jung said, "It is not possible to change something unless we accept it." The first step in overcoming a vice is recognizing that it exists. How can you win a war if you don't even know what you're fighting against? Reflect. What are your weaknesses? What vices are preventing you from growing as a person? Perhaps you already know. Maybe you've thought about it while watching this video. That's a good start. Recognizing that you are under the tyranny of a vice requires courage, but it is the first step toward freedom. 2. Accept that it won't be easy. Vices don't disappear overnight. You'll be tempted to give up, to justify your actions, or to downplay the problem. But remember, vices will always be there, waiting for moments of weakness to attack. Seneca said, "The strongest man is he who is master of himself." This path is not for cowards. If you choose to confront your vices, you are choosing to become someone exceptional. 3. Set difficult but achievable goals. If your vice is pornography, for example, you might commit to eliminating all explicit content for the next 7 days. You don't need to be perfect. What matters is progress. Every time you achieve a goal, you strengthen your willpower. As you increase the difficulty, you develop character, understand your limits, and mature as a person. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. The key is not to be perfect, but to build habits that bring you closer to virtue. 4. Keep your focus on your main objective. You will be tempted, you will fall, you will feel frustrated, motivated, proud, sad, angry. All of this is part of the process. But if you lose sight of the main goal, to be stronger than your impulses, you will return to the cycle of temptation, gratification, and regret. Remember, if you truly love yourself, you will cut off at the root anything that prevents you from growing. If you don't, you will find ways to lie to yourself, to convince yourself that there's no problem, to build excuses, avoid reality, and eventually face an inner death, existing without truly living. Carl Jung said, "An unlived life is a disease from which one can die." Recognize your shadow, accept it, and confront it. Define your path. Seek virtue. Seek excellence. Build yourself into a person of honor. Let your life be an example to follow. Today, you have an opportunity to choose to be stronger than your impulses, more conscious of your decisions, and more committed to your growth. Don't let vices rob you of your freedom, your time, and your dignity. Before we finish, I invite you to reflect. What is the vice that has affected you the most? What decision will you make today to start changing? Leave it in the comments. This space is a community of people like you who are seeking to improve and overcome their limitations. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Together we can build a fuller, freer, and more meaningful life. And remember, excellence does not arise from vices, but from the battle against them. You can win this war. It all depends on you. See you in the next video.